Let me tell you a wild and shocking story that will leave you speechless. My name is Annie, and I own a ranch in the Midwest of America. I've always had a special bond with horses, and one horse in particular had caught my eye. A beautiful white stallion named Silver. Silver was a gentle giant, but there was something about him that made me feel something I'd never felt before. One afternoon, I was grooming Silver in his stable when he started nuzzling against me. At first I didn't think anything of it, but then I felt something hard against my leg. I looked down and my jaw dropped. Silver's 20-inch member was fully erect, throbbing and ready for action. I was shocked and a little turned on, but I tried to ignore it. It's just natural, I told myself. Silver is just excited. But as I continued to brush his coat, he started grinding his pelvis against me. It was clear that he wanted more. My heart started racing and my body started tingling all over. I was tempted to give in to my desires, but I knew it was wrong. I tried to push Silver away, but he was insistent. He pressed himself up against me harder, his member pulsing and throbbing against my leg. I could feel my resolve weakening with every passing second. "Just this once," I whispered as I reached down and stroked his shaft. He whinnied in approval and started humping my hand faster and faster. I could feel the heat of his desire radiating from his body, and it was intoxicating. I looked around to make sure no one was watching, and then I took off my clothes. I stood there, naked and exposed, in front of my horse. Silver's eyes were wide with lust. His nostrils flared and his breath quickened. I climbed onto a hay bale and positioned myself, my legs spread wide and my body ready for him. Silver moved between my legs, his member throbbing and ready to enter me. I took a deep breath, and with one swift motion, he thrust himself inside me. I gasped in shock and pleasure as his member stretched me wide. It was bigger and thicker than anything I'd ever experienced before. I cried out in ecstasy as Silver started thrusting into me, harder and faster with every stroke. The feeling of his member deep inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. I wrapped my legs around him, digging my heels into his flanks and urging him on. I could feel my body building towards climax, and I started grinding against him, matching his rhythm. Silver whinnied loudly, his head thrown back in pleasure. With one final thrust, we both climaxed simultaneously. I felt Silver's hot seed flood my insides, filling me to the brim. We collapsed against each other, our hearts pounding and our bodies slick with sweat. I knew I should have felt guilty, but all I felt was satisfied and spent. As we lay there in the hay, my mind started racing. What had I done? How could I have betrayed my husband like this? But even as these thoughts swirled through my mind, I knew that I couldn't resist Silver. Weeks went by, and our affair continued. I tried to keep it hidden, but I knew that it was only a matter of time before my husband found out. One day my husband came home early from work. I heard him calling out my name as he entered the house. Panic filled my heart as I realized that I had left a trail of evidence leading straight to Silver's stall. "Annie, are you home?" my husband shouted. I quickly got dressed and rushed out of Silver's stall, trying to compose myself. "Yes, I'm here," I replied, trying to sound normal. My husband came into the stable, his brow furrowed. "What have you been doing here?" he asked, his voice accusing. My heart was pounding in my chest. I tried to think of an excuse, but my mind was racing too fast. "I was just cleaning up," I said, my voice trembling. My husband narrowed his eyes. "Annie, I know you're lying. Why is the hay all mussed up, and what's that smell?" I swallowed hard, knowing that I was caught. I'm sorry," I stammered. "I can explain." But my husband wasn't interested in explanations. "I can't believe you do this to me," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "How could you cheat on me with a horse?" I hung my head in shame, unable to meet his gaze. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I never meant for this to happen." My husband stormed out of the stable, slamming the door behind him. I heard the sound of his truck engine roaring to life, and then he was gone. I sat down in the hay, tears streaming down my face. I knew that my marriage was over. There was no way my husband would ever forgive me for what I had done. But as the days passed, I found myself missing Silver more and more. He was more than just a lover to me, he was my confidant, my friend. One day, I couldn't resist the urge any longer. I snuck into Silver's stall, my heart pounding with excitement. He whinnied in greeting, and I knew that I had made the right decision. We made love again, our bodies intertwined and our passions burning as brightly as ever. But our affair was not meant to last. One day, my husband came back to the ranch with a group of men. "We're here to take Silver," he said, his voice cold and hard. "He's going to be sold off to a new owner." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You can't do this," I protested. "He's not just a horse, he's family." But my husband wouldn't listen. The men loaded Silver onto a trailer, and I watched as he was taken away from me, my heart breaking all over again. I couldn't eat or sleep for days after Silver was taken away. The guilt and sadness overwhelmed me, and I knew that I had ruined my life. But just when I thought that things couldn't get any worse, I received a letter from my husband's lawyer. It said that he was filing for divorce, and that he wanted full custody of our children. I was devastated. I had lost everything, my husband, my family, and now my children. With a heavy heart, I packed my bags and left the ranch. I drove across the country, trying to clear my head and figure out what to do next. I ended up in a small town in Colorado, where I found a job working at a stable. It wasn't the same as being with Silver, but it was a start. One day, a young woman came into the stable, looking for a riding lesson. I recognized her as the daughter of the man who had bought Silver. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I heard about what happened to your husband." "I'm sorry too," I said, my voice breaking. "It was all my fault." The young woman looked at me with pity in her eyes. "Well, if it's any consolation, Silver has been a blessing to my family," she said. "We all love him so much." Her words made my heart ache, but they also gave me hope. "I'm glad to hear that he's happy," I said, forcing a smile. "Can I ask you a favor?" The young woman nodded. "Would you be willing to bring him here for a visit?" "Yes. Just for a little while, so that I can see him again." The young woman hesitated for a moment, but then she smiled and nodded. "I think that can be arranged," she said. "Silver deserves to see you too." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, and for the first time in a long time I felt a glimmer of hope. A week later, the young woman arrived with Silver in tow. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw Silver again. He looked so majestic and strong, his coat glistening in the sunlight. I rushed over to him, tears streaming down my face. "Silver," I whispered, burying my face in his mane. "I've missed you so much." He whinnied in response, nuzzling my neck. "I know that I hurt you," I said, my voice shaking. "But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I never meant to cause you pain." Silver seemed to understand, for he nuzzled my neck again, his soft mane tickling my cheek. "I'm so glad that I got to see you again," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for coming back to me, even if it's just for a little while." The young woman smiled. "I'm glad that we could do this for you," she said. "Silver deserves to know that he's loved." And with that, we spent the day with Silver, grooming him, riding him, and just enjoying each other's company.